YouTube. This is Adam Brisbine, first president of the West Coast in Cascadia. I just made a little list of things that I talk about that nobody else does. All little interesting things about me. I had a little visit from Barack Obama and somebody who's supposed to be dead, Bernie Mac, the comedian, who allegedly died in 2012, visited me in my little town of Valley, Washington, the two of them, 3 times. And it was funny, Bernie Mac and I talked about MC Hammer and how much sway he had in the community and how he gave jobs to all his friends. I started a new country on the West Coast in 2014, although it's omitted historically. There is a reason for that. America, for 243 years, since the Declaration of Independence was written, has failed to understand basic rights. So we have an unalienable right to life that must be upheld by the government, or it's our right to start a new country. So that means death row, lethal force by police, and abortion should have never existed if presidents and governors and the Supreme Court actually understood basic rights, which they don't. And that's kind of funny. So from Trump, when he says it's a good idea to put drug dealers to death, when Jay Inslee marches with the Pink Hats, and when the governor of California, Gavin, wants to put people on death row, they don't understand basic rights. So you have an unalienable right to life that must be upheld by the government. Not even the government can take that right away from us. So, interesting fact about me, during Clinton's campaign, I hit up WikiLeaks and I was like, what do you have on Clinton? Because she was going to start World War III with Russia. And that's when we got the Clinton emails, and they put that through Kim.com and the Democratic Convention into a thumb drive, and voila, Clinton's entire presidency was sabotaged. And World War III was averted. So that's what the kind of thing that happens when you have a noocracy in play. Liberty State is an interesting topic. Matt Shea also, like any other politician, fails to understand basic rights when he is an advocate for the death penalty. But in Washington, we essentially became a new state by 71% because of the Second Amendment, and all the sheriffs stood up, and I shook the hand of the Sheriff of Republic at the Liberty State meeting in front of everybody, and sat in the front row, and I heckled Matt Shea a little bit when he talked about Fukushima. I was like, Fukushima killed the ocean. And when I said taxation is theft, he had 5 kind of Gestapo-like cronies come and pull me away, and I was like, halfway through, I was like, I drove over 100 miles to give my speech, and they're pulling me away, and they're not letting me do my speech. And I said, I'm the governor, not this clown. And referring to either Jay Inslee or Matt Shea, it's irrelevant, but you see what's happening. As they pulled me out, I was like, First Amendment right here, and we had Marines there, and people who are standing up for the Second Amendment, but we should be also standing up for the First Amendment when they're pulling me away with 5 guys out of the room. So America's failed to understand the Second Amendment. It's for enemies foreign and domestic. And what does that mean? If we had a foreign invasion and North Korea, for example, if they came and their special forces have helical magazines, what do we have? We have hunting rifles. Well, that's a pea shooter in comparison. That's not the way the founders intended it. And a lot of people argue that they didn't have machine guns back then, but they actually had Gatling guns. So that's something Americans failed to understand. And with all these shootings, a lot of them false flag shootings, well, that's a very controversial topic, but I'll get to that a little bit later. The Vegas shooting, the biggest shooting in U.S. history, was actually from a helicopter, and that's one thing that the people don't know. They didn't see that. They thought it was Stephen Paddock in the window of the Mandalay Bay Casino, but he was blown away in the back of the head. For all we know, he was a patsy for something bigger going on that night. And when you have a machine gun from a helicopter and you have video footage of the muzzle flash from the machine gun of a helicopter flying over that night, that really it ups the ante. And just after that, when you have Jay Inslee banning bump stocks and the whole nation talking about banning bump stocks, that really sends America down the toilet regarding the Second Amendment and its intention. Starting a new country is not easy. In 2015, during the Obama administration, we had the biggest apple dump in history. We had Washington had to dump all its apples at port. You remember the guy hanging upside down in the tree in Seattle throwing apples at people. Well, think about it as a message, In my hometown, Cascadian fruit shippers, the name Cascadian, anything Cascadian locks was burned up with arson. Cascadian fruit shippers was on fire. It wasn't the only apple shed on fire. We have a history of arson in the West, and it's been going on for a long time. Watch the film Pickaxe, talking about Cascadian secession back in the 90s, and you can see footage of them doing flamethrowers from a helicopter burning the forest, and that's just it burned way too much. It started a huge forest fire. It's gone beyond just trying to do responsible forest management to arson and making our trees just fodder as a commodity. So. I predicted the 501 derailment in my rap. It's uploaded in November, a month before it happened on YouTube. That was interesting. Also, it says Cascadia, Cascade 501 on the train, kind of reminiscent of Cascadia. So, there may be a connection there. The Notre Dame okay, remember the cathedral that burned in Notre Dame? I think that was a laser weapon that burned that cathedral, and it's a way to show off. When people want to show off, that's the kind of thing they do. They use their laser weapons and show, oh, we're so cool, we got lasers, and that brings me to Santa Rosa. I actually saw footage of laser beams from an Apache helicopter roasting Santa Rosa, California. And, that's not right. We're talking about buildings, homes, etc., and with the trees surrounding them just fine. These are strategic, targeted buildings that burned up, and cars melting. This is just another kind of intimidation to me. And I faced 5 years of arson as first president of the West Coast, and it's no joke. I want to talk about the type of government that we have. It's the first noocracy. I wrote a book, Cascadia Beyond the Bioregion, the noocracy. And I want you to think about Hypatia, and when Alexandria was burned down, you had these two rivaling factions, and religious dogma was tearing the world apart. And in the middle of it all, you had Hypatia, a representative essentially of the noocracy way back then, trying to preserve a library, trying to preserve knowledge, logic, reason. And a noocracy goes back to Socrates, and he died basically as a martyr for the scientific process, the Republic and Plato. So why am I in command of the U.S. military now? Why should I be? The USS Liberty, when you have a foreign nation attack the U.S. and America doesn't do anything about it, we're lacking leadership, and somebody has to step up to the plate. Somebody has to take charge, and if in a World War III scenario, who's going to really protect the homeland? I talk about the need as a new nation for a world army, because you can't really just do it anymore and get by as an isolationist. So we as the Xennial generation, we require a world army and an end to national conflict that way. Not a world government, but a simplified world army with a simple agenda that is transparent, that everybody can agree upon. A safe end to national conflict and ecological terrorism and conventional terrorism. So when you have 9/11, what is really going on there? It's a really complex topic when you talk about 9/11, and there's a lot of angles of it that people don't really cover in mainstream history. I think that you should all listen to Ken O'Keefe talk about the Project for a Greater Israel. They essentially have hijacked America since 9/11, and you'll notice when politicians talk in front of AIPAC, they care more about talking in front of AIPAC than they do the American people anymore, it seems. And what you see is since World War II, you can't have this brazen conquering of nations. Instead, Israel wants to tiptoe and just stick its pinky toe into the world of expansionism. So when it goes into the Golan Heights, as it takes over the Palestinians and everything, you're having just this little pinky toe of expansionism and a greater takeover of the Middle East. And America has gone off the rails in its leadership, and we would have not had this kind of foreign policy traditionally. Foreign expansion is not our forte, and that's not what we should be about, especially in Cascadia. And as the World Army, we should not tolerate this type of expansionism. So one thing that I talk about that other people are probably too afraid to is I have footage and I lock in still images of a UFO on 9/11, and there's multiple footage and angles of UFOs on 9/11, but in particular, as the second plane hit, there was a little black UFO going between the towers in front of everybody. So all these years, we had a UFO go between the towers as the second plane hit in front of everybody's face, and we failed to see it. So that's what you need, somebody with situational awareness, the no-walker-see, may notice such things. I think it's rather interesting how Cookie Monster, if you ever look at Google up Cookie Monster in 1976 on that little cover, Monsters on the Loose, you've got Cookie Monster taking bites out of the Twin Towers. How did Cookie Monster know about 9/11 back then, you know? You gotta wonder if the U.S. government has been involved in time travel, or if it's really premeditated that far back. And on the cover of Operation Northwoods, you know, you see the Twin Towers in the crosshairs. Oh, one thing that's interesting about me, I was banned by CNN on Facebook for talking about Osama bin Laden getting an interview with CNN. I was like, how did you guys get an interview with Osama bin Laden when everybody's looking for him, when the British are looking for him? And what happened there is CNN corroborated, and they paid people to stand around Osama bin Laden with machine guns to bolster his identity as this terrorist. And he's basically been a scapegoat for this fraud war on terrorism this whole time, and we've talked about him like that. So there's this huge cover-up historically when it comes to Osama bin Laden. When you get into controversy, you know, you may lose friends talking about false flag shootings, and that's one thing that average normal people just cannot, it's a pill they can't swallow, that they do fake shootings, you know. Was it Sarah Jessica Parker on the news, and they're shooting blanks? Perhaps I brought up something interesting about the New Zealand shooting, and I got banned on Facebook for 30 days for bringing up, and I'm sure that most all of you are convinced that that was a real shooting. It could have been actors, but I brought up something that made me a little skeptical, and I got banned for it. And that's just kind of the state that we're in, the fact that his shell casings were disappearing into thin air. They're flying off and disappearing, and wouldn't fall onto the ground. They just disappear, and that, it seems to be, to me, evidence of CGI and manipulation. But talk about that kind of thing, and it's controversial enough that you'll get banned and go against the narrative of stopping. When we talk about guns, and when it comes to gun confiscation, take a look at Hurricane Katrina, and they went door to door taking everyone's guns away. And that was in the U.S., so think about that for a second. They put people into different camps and huddled them up. Anyway, there's two different worlds you can take. You can either go the path that Japan has taken and go no guns, or you can go the path that Switzerland has taken, and I believe that that's the way that the U.S. should go, where they actually train everyone how to use them, and everyone has them. If you're going to have a Second Amendment, you need to go the route of Switzerland, because when you go down this middle path, it's a bumpy road. There's a Y in the road regarding guns and everything. So if you try to keep going down this middle road in America, you're going to have all these problems. So everyone needs to be trained how to use them, or it's going to have to be a super police state where there's surveillance everywhere, and everyone it will spot you if you have a gun, and and some nations have gone that route. You've got to pick which way you're going to go, America. And in Cascadia, I think we ought to take the route that Switzerland has taken. Well, here's another reason why you might suddenly take command of the U.S. military. Since the NDAA, they flipped over a flatbed semi for me in the driveway. Anyway, at the drop of a hat, if I wanted to go 5-star dad, it would be under the premise like this. Consider that there are now psychics that can read your mind. So Russia has psychics now. And when Russia has psychics in the military, and I understand that, and I understand that they can read the minds of every top general and the president. They can read the minds and that way predict every move ahead of time, what they're going to do. Well, that compromises the U.S. military in a way where the 5-star dad has to hop into the picture and take command and have so there's somebody transparent that everybody can trust. And when it comes to the World Army, you see now that the world is on fire. Not only the Amazon, things are getting out of control, and I need to protect this continent. It's important to me that we don't have this divisiveness between the U.S. Have a big wall with barbed wire and talking about shooting people at the border, and in spite of it, whatever strategic value it has, because we need to come together. We have to come together with Mexico and South America in our military as well, so that I can properly defend this continent. And that's the broader vision of Cascadia for me, is a one nation, one continent state. And at least militarily and worldwide, that's what we're striving for. And what it requires nowadays is, it's not about bullets and guns and missiles. We need a firefighting fleet, and we need to put out these arson attacks. And we can't condone this widespread arson that's going around the Amazon and in Africa and Siberia. Worldwide, it's a problem. So we need a firefighting fleet that is galvanized, much like as if like we rose up in World War II, but for fighting fires. I just wanted to mention how important it is that we aren't trying to be braggadocious, fluffing our feathers with our military capabilities. When India shoots a satellite and scatters that debris in orbit, I want you all to understand that when you scatter debris in orbit, it affects all our satellites. So when you hit your satellite to show off, that scatters in space and goes in all directions. It's not like it all just comes back to the ground like it does on Earth. On the ground, that goes in all directions, and that could hit strategic satellites, that could hit important communications for everybody. I am one of the few people who have been able to bring UFOs with my mind. That's a topic you may have heard Paul Hellyer talk about, how we've been visited by various extraterrestrials, and there are a number of known extraterrestrials visiting Earth, and that the military knows about this, and certainly that's really transparent with the former Defense Minister of Canada, but it's a lot more quiet in the U.S., in Cascadia, we are wide open, and we want to talk about who is visiting Earth and what's going on there. I'll just tell you what I know in my personal experience. I've brought UFOs with my mind since May 2004, various kinds, flying saucers. I was recording piano tracks, and I had a flying silver disc fly over my dad's house. Earlier that morning, I saw on the news, and it's never hardly on the news that there's UFOs on the news, but there was a dozen over Mexico City. And later that night, I was visited by what I call light forms, and that's who I've made contact with the most. People who summon UFOs. Most commonly, the few of us that have brought light forms the most. So it looks like a glowing ball of light, and it just so happens I am probably have had the most intimate contact with them. I was upset one day when I had two of them flying over the house that they never land for me, and well, I got an interesting kind of introduction to who they are. So my mom and her dog were 8 miles away, but at the time, but there was our dog Boo Boo, this funny corgi Rottweiler mix with bow legs, and he hobbled down the back steps like he always does and bumped me on the leg just after I was upset about how they never land for me. So I am here to tell you that they can take any form they desire. They can turn themselves into your mom's dog, into a dog, to take the least intimidating form to say hello. So that's what I know. That's who I've seen. And I've seen a lot of different kinds of UFOs. I brought them for random people on the work site, friends, family, and I was friends with a guy who called himself Prophet Yahweh, and we would chat and whatnot. He's passed away now. It's kind of funny how that happened, but go look it up. He summoned a UFO for ABC 13 News, and I think you'll find that rather interesting. When you strive and you try to become the best representative of the noocracy, the world's highest mind, this is the kind of thing that we're interested in. I am rather curious about things like the Hanok prophecy and the Billy Meyer case, and them talking about a second civil war in the U.S. because here I am starting a new country. I don't want there to be a second world war. Of course, nobody wants that. I wear this safety pin because I'm the safety guy. If World War III seems imminent, I try to step in and stop World War III at all costs. And there's very few people in the world who are like that. I'm the safety guy. I gave extraterrestrials permission to shoot down our intercontinental ballistic missiles back in 2004. They've been doing it for a long time. If you don't believe me, go look at Larry King Live, and they talk about UFOs disabling nuclear missiles, and we're being protected from ourselves and what I call the idiocracy. One thing that is important that comes from me is I have two messages from outer space. One regarding how we have too many nuclear power plants. We're getting carried away with our nuclear ambitions. And the other one is do not punish. So if you can think about that, in the U.S., it's very difficult, and it rather goes against the grain when they've created this huge prison industrial complex. Well, if you look at the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, if people actually understood it, putting man in a cage, putting man behind bars, has always been a form of cruelty. And cruelty is against the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. I'm proud to be me. I wanted to tell you there is an interesting crop circle of a jellyfish. Why would they be talking about jellyfish, trying to tell us about jellyfish? Well, we're overfishing the ocean, and jellyfish are taking over the ocean, so maybe take a look at that. We actually had a crop circle in response to Voyager. So Carl Sagan, eat your heart out. We had a crop circle response to the record on Voyager. So take a good look. They said, written in Latin, we oppose cunning and deceit. So if there's a message from aliens, that's what you got. Okay? Take it easy, YouTube. This is President Brisbine signing off.